Hi, folks. I've been asked this week as we've been looking at the intensification of the Cold War about the impact of that period on American young people, on American youth. And I think that's kind of a perfect topic to illustrate the, the split that exists within the literature, within the historiography concerning post-war America. On the one hand, you have a whole series of books which began appearing probably in the 1980s that view the period of the late 40s, 50s into the early 60s as this golden period in American history in which really there was never a better time to be an American in terms of prosperity, full employment, material wealth, and satisfaction with life. And then you have this other body of work which sees things quite differently, that emphasizes American anxiety, division in society, social problems that are not being addressed, intolerance within American society during that period. And so it's almost like you're looking at two different places at the same period in history that are polar opposites of each other in many ways. And so when you look at the impact of the Cold War on young people, um, first of all, keep in mind that the baby boom generation coming of age after the Second World War is considered to be the wealthiest generation of Americans ever in terms of the resources and money that are basically lavished upon them. That's a period of time in which, if you look at popular culture, that youth fashions, clothing fashions, rock and roll music, which is largely intended for young people, this whole youth subculture comes into being. And of course, the reason that's true is that for the first time, young people have access to significant amounts of wealth, and so they can buy things. And so there's an economic market then to be satisfied. So that sort of fits with the view of this golden period that young people that have it well during that period are well off. You also have, for the first time, the majority of young people staying in school and finishing high school. But before the Second World War, the majority of Americans left school at around age 15 or 16 and entered the workforce. And the country is so prosperous after the Second World War that there's no pressure for young people to immediately go off to work in a factory or a mill. I remember my father explaining to my brother and I when we were teenagers. He remarked at one point, he said, I was never a teenager. And of course, chronologically, in terms of age, of course he was. But what he was getting at is that he never had this period of time between childhood and adulthood to kind of relax and sort of, have time to enjoy yourself, sort of explore your identity as a budding human being. My dad was already working part-time at the age of 12, and he went into the Navy at the age of 15. He lied about his age. And so, afterwards, after the war, he came back and immediately went to work. So what he meant was he was never a teenager in the sense of someone with a lot of spare time to enjoy themselves, to go out with their friends to the drive-in movie or, to the fast food restaurant. That world didn't exist for him. Before World War II, I think the high school graduation rate in the United States on average was about somewhere in the range of like 25% of Americans actually got a high school diploma. Everybody else basically went to work. So young people have access to wealth. They have leisure time. There's not the pressure to become little adults right away. But on the other hand, the Cold War is going on, and there is great anxiety within society regarding the prospect for World War III. And after 1949, Once the other side gets nuclear weapons, the prospect for nuclear war and basically global annihilation. And young people are not unaware of that reality. There's a statistic out there that says that like 6 out of 10 um, young people in the late 50s reported having nightmares relating to nuclear war. And in the case of my stepmom, Linda, who was a baby boomer herself and was part of that generation, she had a recurring nightmare that she described that in the nightmare she wakes up and there's no sound at all in the house. It's like she's alone and she can't find any of her other family members. And so she kind of walked through the house and can sense that there's something wrong. And then in the dream, she walked out the front door, down the sidewalk, out onto the front yard. And it's at that point that there's like no traffic. It's like the entire city that she lived in southwestern Missouri is like abandoned. And then, of course, the explosions, the mushroom clouds rising, that, nuclear war has started. And she's looking in the direction of like Wichita, Tulsa, and the other major cities around which she lived, and they're all being hit by bombs and with the blast and everything. And then she would wake up basically in a sweat. And so she apparently had this nightmare, the same scenario again and again. And that's absolutely typical for her generation. Many people are experiencing nightmares as a result of their fear that the world is going to come to an end basically at any time. The government, of course, did its best to calm people down and try to promote a sense of calm. But, young people in that period, they're aware that when you're having a civil defense drill and you're hiding under your desk, that just being under the desktop with your head in your hands is not going to protect you against a thermonuclear weapon. The other thing that I think especially makes the prospect for World War III really frightening is that many parents in that period elected not to talk about it with their children. And when young people would bring up the topic of the potential nuclear war, the parents would often refuse to talk about it. They might say, "Oh, look, Johnny, it's time to go watch your cartoons now," or whatever. If something is so frightening that your parents won't talk about it, I think that compounds the sense of anxiety. It makes it that much worse for young people. I had an aunt who, up in her bedroom, there was like a heating grate in the floor, and it allowed you to hear what people were talking about downstairs in the kitchen. And at night, she would be up in bed listening to her parents talking, and sometimes they're talking about things like nuclear war. And the fact that they didn't talk about that in the open, that they're hiding it, I think made it that much more frightening. And so many young people in the 50s and 60s were seriously thinking about not having families, that maybe it's a mistake to bring another generation into a world that could end at any time. And I remember my stepmom and a lot of her peers, they all seemed to agree that in the event of nuclear war, they wanted to die in the first strike. In other words, rather than going into your basement or into your fallout shelter, they intended to walk out on the front yard and just, get vaporized. And so fatalism is part of that Cold War mentality that many people carry around in that period. And obviously that paradoxically, it can't be a golden period exactly when people have that level of fear. So I hope you had a good week. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you folks later.